Coverage continues tonight on your local election headquarters.
So let's take a look at the latest numbers we have in the governor's race. And there you see with 76% of the vote in, Governor Walker with a 55 to 44% lead over Tom Barrett.
In the lieutenant governor's race, Rebecca Clayfish, the winner there with 75% of the vote. She has 55% of it.
In the District 13 Senate race, which covers parts of Jefferson and Dane counties, this is a final. Scott Fitzgerald has defeated Lori Compass 61 to 38%.
In central Wisconsin's District 23's recall race, the incumbent there winning with 60% of the vote. That's with 58% of the entire vote in.
And in Racine's 21st Senate District, this is just with 20% of the vote, but again, it looks as though Van Wengard is well on his way to victory over John Lehman. It is 62 to 38% right now.
And finally, in north central Wisconsin's District 29, Jerry Petrusky, the Republican incumbent there, or actually the Republican there, winning with 62% of the vote. For more insight on these historic recall races, Local 5's political analyst Tim Dale joins us now.
And we ask him to start. Tim, once again, thank you for joining us, as always. I want to ask you first about the speech that we just heard. Beside the peace offering, what did you hear?
Well, the peace offering is really significant because I think some of Walker's victory margin tonight is probably people who didn't like the idea of a recall election and wanted the state to move forward from this. And I think what we saw even during the campaign was Walker having a message that he regrets some of the things that he did that brought the state to where we are, as divided as we are. So I think it's remarkable to see Walker making this argument, telling his supporters that the election is over, and I think this is going to be a change of tone in the state that we might find refreshing. We're not going to see these political ads any longer, and we probably aren't going to see the heated rhetoric, at least for a while.
Let's talk about the millions of dollars spent on these political ads. Much has been made of them. Given the outcome of the election, were they persuasive?
Well, I think that it certainly is true that money matters in campaigns. I think a lot of people's minds were made up, but it certainly is true that we saw a lot of turnout with this election that we may not have expected with all the negative advertising. Usually negative advertising tends to push down turnout, but I think in this case people saw a lot at stake that went beyond just the negative advertising, and as distasteful as people found it, I think they voted in spite of it.
Now, Tim, we just saw up on the screen a 10% lead. That's not going to end that way tonight.
No, we actually see polls still closing in Milwaukee and Madison. There are still returns that are going to come in. Likely the final margin is going to be somewhere very close to what it was in 2010. In fact, we're going to see more people who have voted in this election, the recall, than voted for these two the first time. So overall numbers, we're seeing a higher turnout than we did in 2010, but the overall margin is going to stay about the same.
National news outlets all watching this race. What are the national implications of the outcome?
Well, I think that national implications are on a couple levels. First of all, people are very interested in what's happening in Wisconsin because it's a question ideologically. Are Republicans right or Democrats right? But I think there are bigger picture issues about whether or not it's good to have politics that divide people or good to have politics that bring people together. And I think Walker and his supporters would tell you that they would rather not have this recall had happened, even though they were victorious tonight. So I think people all over the country, while there might be a message about which party wins or loses, I think looking forward it's going to be more about finding where the political center is and how we can govern from that. And I think we heard Walker talking about that tonight.
I know he wants to make peace, but has this emboldened other governors across the nation? Will they take this chance?
I think that's an interesting question. I think that on the one hand, these governors aren't going to want to face a recall election, so they certainly aren't going to do that. They may end up following Walker's advice, where he says that we should be people who stand on principle, but we also want to be people who talk to the other side. And so I think if there's a lesson from that, it's that we do want politicians to stand for what they believe in, but ultimately we have a democracy where we have to listen to each other.
On the other hand, is there a lesson to be had for public sector unions and unions in general?
Well, I think that's going to be a question going forward, and it's certainly going to be a question for the unions in terms of organization. They didn't have a victory tonight. There is still going to be ongoing conversation about how they mobilize, but I think that it is going to be a question for even Walker. We heard during the debates between Walker and Barrett questions about right-to-work legislation. And Walker says that he's not against private sector unions. So I think this is going to be an ongoing conversation about the role of unions in the workplace. But I think in Wisconsin, at least in the private sector, there's going to continue to be a place for unions.
Tim Dale of UWGB, thanks so much once again for being with us.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. Well, we have reaction now from local Republicans to the victory speech by Governor Scott Walker tonight. Melaine Wells takes us there. Hi, Melaine.
Well, we are at Titletown Brewing, downtown Green Bay, and several hundred miles away from where Scott Walker is holding his victory party tonight. But I have no doubt in my mind, if you would have opened the windows here during his speech, he would have heard us loud and clear. Reaction here enthusiastic as numbers have come in this evening, and of course during the governor's speech. I'm joined by Andre Jacques, one of our state representatives. Andre, how exciting was this for you to see these results come in?
Well, you know, it's just tremendously affirming that we're put in office to really deal with the tough issues, and now we can finally move Wisconsin forward. This is something that's been really hanging as a cloud over our state, over the legislature for a long time, and now we're able to, again, deal with some of these tough issues and really allow businesses and entrepreneurs, people that were looking at hiring but weren't sure who was going to be in office past June, to, you know, really be able to make that next step and commit to growing our economy again. So this is tremendously exciting, and really, you know, for the other people in this room, and I know some of them just left after the governor spoke, but it really is just this is their night. You know, they went and spoke to neighbors and friends, family members, people who maybe hadn't been that involved in the political process before. I think you saw a lot of people turning out and voting tonight that weren't at the polls in November of 2010, and I think that really speaks to, you know, people becoming more attuned to the political process and how important it is that we reward political courage. We did face just a very difficult situation with our state's budget, being in a $3.6 billion deficit, turning that around and getting to a situation where people are looking at how we can now pivot out of this downturn and grow jobs, and I think you're going to see a lot more of that as months go forward.
And we heard the governor today invite everyone over for brats and beer, and what is really the message to get, you know, folks from both sides of the aisle to pass the ketchup, if you will?
Well, you know, I think that is something where when you have an election, you know, just off on the horizon, it's very difficult for people to have the normal conversations. People don't want to give a win to the opposing political party or do any number of things that, you know, really we should be doing that we were able to do on a wide variety of legislation. But now on things like the mining bill, you know, on just common sense things of how our state economy works, you're going to see that willingness, I think, for both sides of the aisle to engage. And I think certainly when you see the kind of results like we had tonight, that shows that there's going to be some permanency to the way that we've started to address the situation, and hopefully we can all come together now, move forward, and take a look at how we're going to work together to make Wisconsin more prosperous in the years to come.
All right, we appreciate your time, State Representative Andre Jacques, who is finishing up his first term in office. It's been quite a ride for him. He says, though, he'll be on the ballot again this November. We are live in Green Bay. Melaine Wells, Local 5 News HD.
All right, Melaine, thank you.
Lots also going on in the world of sports today.
And Burt Griffin joins us now with more.
Tom and Aaron, no recalls in this side of the arena, only wins and losses. The Packers, of course, on the field for their final OTA practice, plus the Boys State Golf Championships, and bids to Fox City Stadium on the line today in prep baseball. Sectional finals from all 4 divisions coming up next in sports.
Now here's a look at tonight's winning lottery numbers. Pick 3 is 575, pick 4, 7863, and your Mega Millions number 37, 39, 42. Take another look at the latest numbers from the polls.
These are the latest numbers from tonight's governor's race, and here you see with 78% of the vote in, Walker with still an 11-point lead over Tom Barrett, 55% to 44%. Earlier we brought you Tom Barrett delivering his concession speech, and Scott Walker speaking as well this evening. Now, we have more reaction tonight on these recall races.
We are joined by WTAQ radio host Jerry Bader and local attorney Tim Nixon. Thanks for joining us.
And if you listen to Jerry's show on Friday morning, you will know that these two gentlemen debate each other. As Jerry introduces this segment, it's always Jerry saying, he of the left, me of the right. I've been waiting for all day long, gentlemen, regardless of how this election came out tonight. Your reaction, what did we see today?
Well, I think what you saw was a validation of Scott Walker's policies. And I don't know that the margin that you see right now is going to hold. It'll probably close pretty close to where it was in 2010. Massive turnout, not just where Tom Barrett needed it, but where Scott Walker needed it. You saw passion, and in the end, you saw the message that Scott Walker said, 1, my policies are working, and 2, a policy dispute is no reason to cut a term short.
Well, I'm not going to quite, as usual, I'm going to stay to the left of Jerry on this one. I think you saw was an electorate sort of tired of the recall process. I don't know that we discussed a lot of policy. We certainly discussed a lot of numbers. We certainly don't know what the long-term role of government's going to be and exactly how we're going to govern the state. But one thing that I think is true, and I think you would agree with this, is it was a good night for democracy in the state of Wisconsin, in the sense of that regardless of how you feel about the outcome, the number of people involved in the process speaks well of the state.
There's been lots of angry rhetoric on both sides. Do you think it's possible to bury the hatchet and move forward as a more united Wisconsin?
You know, we're going to find that out. I know that Governor Walker was somewhat conciliatory in his victory speech. The reality is, though, Governor Walker has never said that he would do any policies different. He said that he would talk more, he would explain before acting. I don't think all the explaining in the world was going to be the sugar that was going to make this bitter pill go down. He is decisive. He, quite frankly, and Tim disagrees with this, he was bold in his action. Now, you might see that tempered a bit, but don't look for Scott Walker suddenly to be some moderate. And the people who, again, elected him, I can't say re-elected, elected him tonight, don't expect him to be. Does the hatchet get buried? Talk to the side that has been taunting him, harassing him, and engaging in childish behavior for the last year and a half. I guess we'll find out from them.
Well, I can ask you how you guys, if you guys are going to continue that or not. But no, I think what we're going to happen is we're going to have divide and conquer more politely with please and thank you attached to it. Let's be clear on one thing. Wisconsin is not a purple state, and I think, again, we've proven that tonight. We are a red state and we are a blue state. And at some point in the long term, those policy differences are going to have to be resolved. Certainly tonight they were resolved in favor of the governor. The question is whether in the long term they're going to be resolved in favor of the governor.
Guys, do you think that this result tonight emboldens other governors across the nation?
I do, and Tim and I might disagree on this. I think it does in this regard. There are just really only so many answers to the fiscal crisis that state after state after state are facing. And I think, quite frankly, the dirty little secret here is public employee unions and Democrats weren't just afraid of Republican governors being more emboldened by this. Rahm Emanuel in Illinois is screaming to Springfield, I can't afford these pensions anymore. I think the dirty little secret is governors, period, may be emboldened to do this.
Well, the question is whether governors want to go through what Governor Walker has gone through and what the state of Wisconsin's gone through for the last 15 months.
They won't.
And I think the answer is probably no. I think certainly there's going to have to be fiscal adjustments, but again, we haven't discussed some of the major issues facing the country and facing the state. If you look at the state budget, what's really driving the cost up? It's not public employees. It is Medicaid, it is prisons, it is those other things. And the question, and we had very little discussion of those substantive issues in this recall election.
Gentlemen, as always, civil insight on both of your parts, and we thank you so much, Jerry Bader and Tim Nixon, for joining us tonight.
We'll be right back.